What's been happening with DaBaby recently is a prime example of why I say marketing in your career as a rapper is probably the most important thing that you can do or have. Having a decent reputation, having a name that people can vouch for, positive experiences generally with your audience or the people that you do business with, your entourage. All these things matter. And of course, they matter primarily because you want people around you to feel safe. You should want to treat others with respect and some sort of courtesy just because that's who you are. Of course, that should be your primary focus. But the benefit of treating people with that level of courtesy, respect, and consideration is that when you do something that people look at as potentially out of character or something that you don't usually do, they have a track record of everything positive that you've done and how well you've treated people over the years to contradict this one moment where you lashed out or did something quote unquote out of character. It makes you look better when you have a track record and a positive reputation in dealing with others for people to go back to and recollect in reference to a recent controversy that you may have had. I said this about Travis Scott during the Astroworld Festival tragedy. No one outside of his hardcore demographic knows anything about him because he's done a horrible job at marketing his personality. So outside of him just being a talented artist, not even his own fan base have anything poignant to say about his personality, about the type of person that he presents himself as throughout his music even. Watching that interview that he did with Charlemagne, you come away from that interview knowing nothing, not feeling assured, not feeling that he's remorseful, not feeling that he understands what happened. His apology was so far removed, it was so detached from everything. And while I don't believe that Travis Scott shares 100% of the blame in that situation, I only use him as an example to say you need a positive track record if you are going to be in this shit long term. You need people to be able to vouch for you outside of other celebrities. You need the common everyday person to be able to believe you if you are at all concerned about your public reputation or your public image, because it will at some point affect your business. If you are an entertainer, you are basically a public servant, and the public can and will have an impact or an influence on how well your business does. So we land on DaBaby. DaBaby has been in controversy after controversy. He's beating someone up outside of a club here. He's slapping some woman in the face. On stage yelling homophobic, he's smacking some dude at a club. He's beating up some other guy at a store. He's beating up some other guy at a show. He's beating up and fighting his own artist. And while to someone who's paying attention and trying to be as objective as possible, they could nitpick through those controversies and see instances where DaBaby could be justified or in the right, like when he was slipping and sliding in that bowling alley fighting his ex-girlfriend's brother, or having to shoot some dude that broke into his house recently. But when the majority of your public image is built off of the premise of you being a violent individual and people knowing you for the antics that go trending through social media, that's you. So back in 2018, DaBaby had an altercation which ended up deadly, where at the time he had claimed that he was acting in self-defense because two people had basically approached him, indicating to him that they would have liked to start a problem or an issue. In so many words, he did what he had to do to protect his family. However, his protection of his family cost 19-year-old Jalen Craig his life. But the way it was presented years ago left most people with the impression that he literally saw DaBaby and his family, walked up to him and started an issue. That is the way that this self-defense claim was put out to the public. Now, years later, Rolling Stone has released an article in which they have the actual video that shows what happened in that Walmart 4 years ago. And y'all can read the article. I do encourage you to read the article because it humanizes Jalen Craig in a major way. It kind of gets us to understand that it was, I believe, a huge misunderstanding. It's unfortunate that a young man had to lose his life in this instance, but I do believe that both parties were confused at each other's intentions. We hear comments throughout this article from Henry Douglas, who was a friend and associate of Jalen Craig while they were at this Walmart. The perspective of Jalen Craig's mother, his father, how his death affected them. I encourage a read of the article just based off of you gaining a larger perspective of the person who had their life taken away that day. But upon looking at the video, I don't see anything that contradicts DaBaby's original statement. But what I have seen is massive discourse around how DaBaby needs to be retried, have the case open back up. DaBaby needs to go to hell. DaBaby needs to go to jail. If this article did not include the, I don't know if you'd call them testimonies or just experiences post Jalen Craig's death from his friends and family, I would tell you that this was a worthless article because it doesn't do anything outside of add a slightly additional perspective to something that I feel most people, if they listened well enough to what DaBaby said before, already knew. The discourse around this seems to be that because DaBaby initiated contact with the person that he assumed was trying to start an issue with him first, after seeing him multiple times in this Walmart, he is somehow the reason that Jalen Craig lost his life. When in this very same video footage clip, you can clearly see that Jalen Craig at some point brandishes his weapon, his gun. Now, I don't know where y'all are from, but in my thoughts, just seeing a weapon is enough to incite a stronger reaction or escalate an altercation. If I'm just throwing hands with someone and I see a firearm from someone, I'm gonna assume that's the green light. I'm gonna assume that you want to escalate the situation. Otherwise, why are you showing it to me? Why are you initiating contact with your firearm unless you are about to do something to me? I know in the communities and the areas that some of y'all are from, it's normal for police to show up on site and immediately reach for their firearm in order to quote unquote de-escalate a situation. But in normal people land, when you are in an altercation with someone, either verbal or physical, and there are no weapons involved, and then another party shows up reaching for his weapon, the situation intensifies 100-fold. It's no longer what it was, regardless of the state laws in North Carolina. DaBaby's in an altercation with the first one. The second guy, Jalen, he comes up, shows the weapon. Immediately, the situation escalates. He's got a gun, boom. It can be as quick as that. The discourse surrounding DaBaby as it relates to this video footage finally being released really has been sickening to me. Not because DaBaby is like this holier than thou individual and I can't believe people in any capacity have a problem with him. It's just that they're so eager to overlook the situation that for most people would be a bit alarming if you threw it at them because of their disdain for DaBaby and his actions. Of course, DaBaby is probably a terrible person. DaBaby is probably someone who, as far as their ideals and their morals are concerned, you might not agree with. I understand that. But in regards to looking at situations like this, where you're supposed to be the most objective while also claiming to want this to go to trial, it sets a dangerous precedent because there is no perfect way to handle a situation like this. I'm sure there are people that if given this situation, they would try a more submissive approach. And then there are others like DaBaby and myself who will probably concur with his ideals in this situation, agree with being more proactive. There are pitfalls and benefits to being submissive and proactive. For instance, if you are too submissive, you leave yourself open to whatever dangers whoever is approaching you has in store for you. If you believe that submission is the way to protect your family and the way to protect those that are closer to you, you might be in for a rude awakening. Thinking that it's realistic for you to be able to brandish a firearm or a pistol or a gun or any kind of weapon and expect the situation to not escalate is a reality that only exists for people who've never been in an altercation. However, the pitfalls of being too proactive is that you may take the situation too far. DaBaby in this situation tried to be proactive. He tried to prevent a situation where he was in the submissive position because he doesn't want to put himself at the mercy of anyone who may threaten him or his family. Even though it was a misunderstanding, even though these dudes were approaching him off the premise of, we know you, We've heard your songs. We've heard your music. That is not an assumption that everyone has, and that's not a bet that every person is willing to make. There's no easy way to navigate a situation like this, is what I'm saying. And just because DaBaby is a despicable person to a lot of people right now does not change the fact that this situation should still not be looked at as a self-defense case. The only reason all of this is relevant in the first place is because it becomes a lot easier for people to acknowledge you being in the right in a situation where you are clearly in the right when they believe that you are some type of righteous individual. Now, of course, I would like to live in a world where people were more objective to a point where they could hate you and agree with the thing that you did to protect yourself, but that's not the world we live in. And I don't know the reputation of Rolling Stone as a publication. I don't know how they generally view people of color, and I don't know if this was an attempt to humanize Jalen just to weaponize him against DaBaby because people don't like DaBaby now. And let me add, justifiably so. There are tons of things that he's done. I just think that for this article to say so much, it basically says nothing. The video doesn't undercut the self-defense claim. It doesn't contradict it. It doesn't invalidate it. It is what it is. Moral of the story: for artists, you need to worry a lot more about your reputation and realize that you're still in school. You still have an image, and your image isn't just to make people like you. Your image is to, in case you do something or something happens, people can believe you. Because then you have images and videos and articles written about you that are like this, that paint a narrative that people will run with, because guess what? That sounds like him. He definitely would do something like that. Based off your reputation, yeah, that sounds like it. That sounds like it fits. And they get to say that without even reading the article. They get to say that without even having to hear you out, because you've made it easy for them until they read it and they realize this doesn't say shit.